So why do I enjoy this approach? I think for me, the field of coaching and positive psychology are very complementary. I think they've almost, if you think back to when coaching really started getting traction, it's a very similar time to the birth of positive psychology. And I think they've both grown at the same time. And it's only over the last dozen or so years, 10 or so years, that they've started to come together. And there is a lot of work being done in the field now by the likes of Susie Green and Palmer and Bonniwell. There's some really powerful folk out there doing some amazing work. And I'll share their names with you I'll make sure that you have access to those folks' research if you would like it. I think secondly, and this is me and the academic approach that I tell, Pete and I have a conversation about this all the time. I really do believe that if I'm going to be delivering an intervention or an approach to coaching with my coachees, my clients, I do want to know that there's really rigorous scientific support supporting what it is that I do. I classify myself as a pracademic. I believe that, I just feel that I need to ensure that the work that I'm delivering and the work that I'm doing has very, very rigorous backing. The third part about this is that I've seen the agency that this approach to coaching can build within our clients. Giving a coachee a mental toolbox. And, it's not me saying you must do this, but it's giving a wide range of tools and strategies that they can get to pick and choose from to allow them to build this. My master's research when I was doing that was in sports psychology, was in this idea of self-efficacy. How do we build self-efficacy within our clients, within our athletes, whoever it is we're working with? And I think that, the term now that we use is this agency. And then what I love about this approach is that there's multiple pathways. So it gives a really clear structure, but also within that structure, there's a lot of flexibility. So it's focused yet flexible. And hopefully I'll unpack that a little bit for you in the next few. So folks, I'm going to have to just jump off and let my dog in because he's scratching the door down at the moment. Give me 5 seconds. The joys of working from home. I use two frameworks. The first framework is Martin Seligman's PERMA framework. Originally, when he put this framework in place, it was just PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. You can see on the top right. And at a later stage, there was the V added, which is vitality. So PERMA is Martin Seligman in his research believe that there are these 5 and now 6 pathways to flourishing as human beings. The idea of positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, having meaning in one's life, achievement and accomplishment, and then the last one is vitality, which is around that whole idea of actual physical health. And what I've found is that it gives a really neat structure of areas that I can focus on with my coachees. Having a structure, a pathway that we can then dive into and talk about, for me has been something, especially if I'm seeing someone over a period of 10 sessions, say, we can be really explicit in how we unpack that. It's not prescriptive at all, but it does give some neat structure into how we do it. The second model pathway there, or pathways that I've started using of late in education is Lee Waters' search framework, the one on the bottom 2. And I think this is born out of a couple of things. Number one, doing the course with Pete and Mick, because I think the strengths-based approach, I've always used strengths-based approach to my coaching, but actually it's come to the fore a lot more since doing the course, and looking at how we can do that. And Lee Waters' search model actually explicitly uses that. The PERMA model does under engagement, but actually it's not, you know, what I really love about the search model is it's nice and visible there. So the second part, the emotional, the E part is emotional management. And this is very much the same as the positive emotions in the Seligman model. The second part, the third part, attention and awareness, relationships. So again, some mapping very closely onto the PERMA model. But the last two also speak very much to me in terms of my coaching at the moment. And I think this has, of course, been driven a lot by COVID, is this idea of coping, the C at the end. So actually looking at explicitly building the, you know, grit and resilience and optimism and all of those kinds of skills within our clients. And then the last one, which I have always done a lot of work in, and very much, I'm a big fan of BJ Fogg and the idea of tiny habits, was this idea of habits and goals. So I've started using Lee Waters' search model a lot more in my coaching, because it just speaks to the areas that I'm finding very important at the moment in my coaching. So just a few, before I jump off, the nice thing about PERMA, and because it's been around for such a long time, is that if you go onto AuthenticHappiness.org, this PERMA profiler is a free assessment that you can actually get your clients to do. You can actually get them to go on, do the assessment, and it actually, and what it does, it gives you a really nice visual of where your coachee might need to focus a little bit. And I think that's always it can be a useful tool, even if it's just there as a visual to raise awareness and as a point of conversation. You know, to say to your client, well, I noticed that you only scored a 7 on or 6.5 on your positive emotions. You know, so what does that, you know, what does that tell you? Why do you think that is? You know, why do you feel you may score slightly lower there than you say do on engagement? And if you're scoring at a 7 on engagement, and this, to be fair, I don't think I've ever seen a PERMA profile come out like this. This is way flatter than I normally it's quite spiky. So they're normally areas of real focus. So to say to them, well, you know, what makes you score high on engagement? You know, what is that you do there? This is an engagement speaks to things like flow, you know, that whole idea of being able to get in, you know, me high chicks in my highs flow and in the zone. So really nice as a conversational piece, as a starter, to be able to unpack that. A few examples of what, and that bottom right there, the search model where it's strengths, and you can see, and we all know, I mean, the Clifton strengths can be under there. There's the VIA survey. I don't know if any of you know that, viacharacter.org. Values in action is again a free strength survey that you can do, but that one's more around the and I've actually got it up there on the right. That's more around the 24 character strengths. That was done by Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman to try and unpack the 6 values and virtues, 4 of which are the Stoic philosophical Aristotelian philosophies or virtues at least, and then the additional 2, which are, I'm going to forget what they are. Transcendence is one of them, because ancient philosophies never ever had transcendence. That's things like awe in their virtues. And for the life of me, I cannot think of what the 6th one is. But yeah, so a really good model to look at, and to say it sits very differently to the Clifton. As a matter of fact, I like using both because they are quite different. One's more virtues, strength.
Craig, where can you access the VIA character strengths?
Yes, so if you go onto VIA character.org, and you're able to set up a profile for free for yourself, and it is your clients can do the assessment for free. You send them a link, and you then get the results as well as them, or they can go on themselves and do it. And of course, they get the results. But it's quite nice for you to be able to send that to them and get the results yourself as well, so you can unpack it before you actually see them. The nice thing about having the professional one is it's still free. If you want to then buy the, the full package where you really want to unpack it in depth, you can. So, but I must admit being able to identify the 24 character strengths is enough as a starting point, I think, especially with how skilled you all are at coaching. So that's there, obviously, just to give you a couple of examples of the types of things we do under each of those pathways. The PERMA, positive emotions. I do a lot of work on this idea of Barbara Fredrickson's buoyancy, which is getting folk to understand that because it's positive psychology doesn't mean that we're just trying to be positive, because that's not what positive psychology is. Positive psychology is as much about dealing with negative emotions. So Barbara Fredrickson talks about this idea of buoyancy, how we need to have gravity. We need to understand how to deal with negative emotions. But also there needs to be, and because negative emotions are much weightier and heavier, we need to understand that the levity part comes from the positive emotions and how do we cultivate those. So we talk a lot about cultivating positive emotions, things like gratitude, awe, love, all those really powerful positive emotions, because when we are in a positive emotional state, we go into our prefrontal cortex. When we end up thinking, we are better thinkers, we broaden our perspective, we're able then to get onto what Barbara Fredrickson calls a positive spiral of broaden and build. So this is the scientific research into this. Whereas when we're in negative emotions, when we are in our limbic brains, then our capacity to think is diminished. We're not as good at solving problems. We're not as good at creating relationships. So getting our clients to understand how powerful it is to be able to cultivate positive emotions, but also be able to deal with the negative emotions. So there's a lot of work in that space. Engagement is around understanding the benefits of flow, understanding the benefits of strengths-based approach to work. So if under that E pathway, that is specifically where I would be looking at a person's Clifton strengths and saying, okay, so, and looking at their values in action and actually unpacking, when you are in work, where if you want to flourish, you need to know what your strengths are. And we all know that piece. Relationships, understanding the physiological and the emotional benefits of having strong social support. The research is there again. Very, very powerful work done especially in times of difficulty like now, around how important relationships are. Meaning, that's kind of, always my jump off point when I'm talking to my clients about meaning is the idea of Simon Sinek's why, put it down the golden circle. What is your purpose? What is your true meaning? And to get clients and my coachees to work on identifying their meaning. Sonia Lyubomirsky does a lot of work in this as a positive psychologist, where, in her phrase is happy people have projects. And it's the idea, well, what are your projects? What is the meaning? What is your purpose? And then achievement is, again, and this is where I look at the work of BJ Fogg and, his ABC, anchor behavior celebration. We need to have these micro moments of celebration. We need to have small wins, because when we have small wins, it builds self-efficacy within us. So to work within saying, so often we set these big, huge, unbelievably great goals. And we forget to put the little mini milestones in place so that our coaches and our clients can see. So what is it? And again, it's asking questions. So what are the little moments of success in between? And how do you celebrate those successes? Then vitality is around the 4 pillars: sleep, cognitive well-being, physical well-being, and nutrition. So just ensuring, saying, what are the 4 pillars? Are you as if I'm working with a headmaster of a school, saying, how much sleep are you getting? And invariably, and we all know this because I imagine many of us in this Zoom room will suffer from the same thing, where we probably don't get enough sleep. And yet, we all know that we should be getting at least 7 hours sleep, and preferably 9. And yet we probably don't. So just getting that's one pillar, then the nutrition piece and looking at what are people doing in terms of their physiological and emotional or their cognitive well-being, and that's as simple as breathing techniques, yoga, going for a run, what is it that adds to your vitality. So that's really nice and neat, the PERMA model. And then you can see, I'm not going to speak too much around the search model, that the pieces are there. And I'll share this with you, so you don't have to necessarily scribble away, but what are each of the, yeah.
Great, just a couple of questions from Adam. One around some imagery around the positive and negative emotions, and any sort of diagrams that you might have of the brain and connecting that positive and negative emotions.
Absolutely, I do.
And then the other question from Adam was around, how do you suggest celebrating small successes with your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that I try and work on, and maybe this is me because of if I look back at my own history, I think I've tied my own success too much to an extrinsic reward. So I work really hard on working with my coachees to build, funny, the name of my consultancy, Intrinsic, because how do we build this intrinsic reward? So for me, I often say to my coachees, giving yourself a virtual high five needs to be something that really boosts you. So, things like, and saying to yourself things like, that's like me, people know this. He's asked me, so I ran a 50-mile trail run this weekend, and 2,000 meters of elevation and whatever. And actually getting to the end, one of the things I want to say is that that's like me. This is what I do. Just that intrinsic reward. I didn't do it to get a medal. I didn't do it to come first. I didn't do it to, it was about celebrating intrinsically. So Adam, I think a lot of what I'm trying to build with coaches and clients is this, how are you internalizing this and saying to yourself, this is me. When I am successful, this is like me. When I'm successful, virtual, give yourself a mental high five, so that it becomes something that you are doing because you want to be just that. When I often talk about plus one. And is this a plus one moment? And if it is, yeah, that's like me.
That's like me at my best. Is that what you're saying? That's like me.
That's like me. I do. This is how this is me. So when I do something that is a positive, that is, I go, but that's like me. This is what I do. I'm constantly getting better. I'm constantly improving. I'm constantly I'm being an optimist. I'm trying to be better now than I was an hour ago, better tomorrow than I was today. So trying to move away from extrinsic reward, trying to move away from people saying to me, oh, well done, Craig, great, yes, I saw you do that. And I think we've become, social media is the worst, because we put ourselves up on Facebook and say, I did this. So on Facebook and say I ran 50 miles. And then, if too often with our clients, they judge how well they did on how many likes or how many positive comments they then get off their social media. And just to try and counterbalance that with some intrinsic sort of, so that's where I'm working. And I think, there's of course there's value in extrinsic reward, but I think we need to try and shift the balance to more the intrinsic stuff. I don't know if I've answered your question.
So do you see the intrinsic being critical in overall success? So Ben was talking about communities, and it's much better to be in control of your own communities than be reliant on, say, Peter turning up, setting up this call every quarter or something. So it's in control of your own.
I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're asking, but I think critically, if you talk about relationships, if we are going to get an extrinsic reward, we'd far rather have it from those close to us. I think it's far more powerful. I personally think we should, and I know this is the utopian view of things, but we should really not worry about what other people think who are not within our close, our immediate circle of influence. You know, and so those really close communities, yes, that's where your extrinsic reward should come from. But actually, even more powerful than that should be how we sense ourselves when we are successful, and to try and build that muscle rather than be worried about what we're seeing on social media or what some guy thinks about us who we've never met before.
Can I?
Number one, be your own fan.
Yeah, I really believe that. Number one, be your own fan. And then secondly, just those really close to you. And once you step beyond that, we shouldn't really be taking too much notice. I mean, that's very broad, obviously, because, you know, what does your circle look like? You need the client to define that for themselves. Carrie, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and let's put the hand down so I don't forget. No, one of the things that I was thinking of in relation to that, Craig, was that some of the work we do with schools, and like you, I work in education, is that we try and say to schools, don't rely on your reward system. Schools got very hung up at one point on reward systems. You know, if as a pupil or a student, you do this, you get this sticker, you get this level of reward, you get these vouchers, whatever it is. But lots of schools have really complicated rewards and sanction systems, none of which really work terribly well. They all do to a degree, but there comes a point where what you need is for the youngsters to be wanting to do well for themselves. And I think the earlier and the sooner we can build that intrinsic motivation, and I think that this intrinsic rewards is linked to that starting point of intrinsic motivation. And Pete, I know you're going to do something on motivation next week, aren't you? And I can't be there, I'm afraid. I'd love to be. I think that's a really important starting point, is building that. It's got to come from within type approach, and then that links to those intrinsic rewards rather than always relying on something to happen externally for, you know, to give you that pat on the back. Yeah,
absolutely. And just going back to the reward thing, and so one of the, and we know that there's a physiological response to reward, you know, and intrinsic is very powerful, but any reward. And just going back to why something, when we create these huge goals, why it's so important to have those mini milestones of success where we can tick them off and pat ourselves on the back or whatever it is because there's a physiological response. You know, oxytocin gets dumped into our body, and so which strengthens those. And if we're only having that right at the end, and this is where I'm massively critical of education in terminal exams, you know, our education system has set up, you know, everything's real, as you say, Carrie. I mean, we have these reward systems in our school. The mark system is one of them, and we don't build in the why. You know, why am I doing this subject? Why is it important? The exploration and the journey is kind of lost, and you know, you know, there's definite work trying to get it back. But as human beings, I mean, we've gone through systems where everything's been about extrinsic reward, and so I think it's a really powerful, kind of get the balance back to you know, because when there's intrinsic reward to something, the client's in control then. You know, they're in control. You know, where it's extrinsic, we're relying on how many likes we get on Facebook or whether we win the prize, or, you know, got to come first to get the gold medal. And so I think it's really, really important. And I've totally lost my track of thought as to where I was, but I mean, we're all right at the end. So I think I've managed to touch on each of those. But any questions? Because I think we're probably close to question time in any case, Pete, aren't we?
Yeah, thanks for that, Craig. And
sorry, Pete, one last thing before. So this, just goal setting, you know, grow model. We talk about when, you know, kind of our process, we talk about setting goals, and some people use SMART goals, some people whatever. I love using this. This is Gabriele Oettingen, who's a German positive psychologist. She uses this. The full name for it is mental contrasting with implementation intentions, and it's called WOOP. But what it is this idea of, and she says it's the way that you need, it's your goal setting technique that rubs your dreams up against reality. And I think it's a really powerful exercise. And I've got the link to this because there are some wonderful free resources that you can use with your clients, with your coachees to build this kind of thing. So, and again, also BJ Fogg uses the if-then strategy. But what it is what is your wish? So what do you want? So it's kind of now you're starting to visualize and the outcome, you know, visualizing the end point. Okay, next year I want to run a 100-mile trail run. So that's my wish. I visualize myself coming across the finish line. I know what I want to achieve, but actually I need to, that's where normal goal setting stops. But now what I want to do is I want to rub that up against reality and say, okay, well, what are the obstacles? Like, let me list all the things that could stop me from getting that. You know, I don't train enough. I don't eat correctly. You can name them. And then what you do is you then create a plan to address each of the obstacles in turn. So what you start doing is you start getting your clients to visualize the outcome, pre-visualize any potential obstacles so that when they are faced with that obstacle, they have a plan to deal with it. I think it's really, really powerful. And that's the, if my alarm goes off and I still feel tired, then I will, you know, what is my strategy? And you give the agency to the coachee and you say, what is your plan? You know, if you pick up an injury, then what is your plan? If then. And really powerful for clients if they can pre-plan their solutions before they face any of these obstacles in reality. So that's just one technique that I find massively useful for you know, in the process of yeah, I'll use an example of one of the athletes that I work with. He's a drag flicker. For those of you who play hockey, sorry, you know, sorry, Pete, I guess we have to drop in hockey somewhere.
Well, I don't think it'll work.
I don't think Carrie ever heard about hockey. When
you might enjoy a couple of golf analogies.
Yeah. So, you know, this whole idea and what we worked on was, what do you want? Okay, well, I want to be scoring drag flicks at the Olympic Games under the biggest pressure. When we play against Germany and the score is 2-2 and I get a penalty flick, I want to be able to score it. So then he visualizes the outcome. And then what are the obstacles? And pretty much the obstacle for him was total lack of belief in his own ability. Like, the guy's unbelievable. I mean, he's, you know, drag flicks international thing, but still didn't think he was good enough. So then to visual, and actually his was all about how he sensed himself, what he felt. He buttoned up. And all of a sudden, so he couldn't really just let himself go. So he was just that little bit, and Pete's a drag flicker, so he'll know what this is like. If you have any tension in your body when you're flicking, you're just never going anywhere. So we worked on creating a physiological response. If then created an anchor, those of you who have done NLP, created a really powerful anchor that when he was in that situation, he anchored himself, he built a plan to create a physiological anchor that just released the tension, and he went in. And the score was 2-2 when he scored to put it up 3-2. And they the first time they've ever beaten Germany in the history of any big tournament. So